Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, I think the member for Barker, rather than letting that beer go cold, has been knocking back a few because he's rewriting a history that this place saw. And that history was Labor pushing with the unions for a JobKeeper-style program, a wage subsidy that kept the connection between the workers and their employers. And we were not behind, but way ahead of the government in its thinking. And what we got, of course, when the government finally went, oh my goodness, there's queues at Centrelink, we better do something because what we've done, as always, is not enough. They rushed legislation into this place. And look, I do think it says something about us that we trusted this government. We should have known better. I know, I apologise. I am very happy to say we made a mistake in thinking that those opposite would do the right thing. We made a mistake in trusting that they would do what they said they'd do. We acted in good faith. And I have had people say to me, why could you have supported something that allowed companies that did not need JobKeeper to take $13 billion of taxpayer funds and never have to repay it? How could you have let that happen? But of course, what we did, and I say, is we trusted them to do the right thing. What a mistake that has been for the taxpayers, that any trust was placed in this government to do anything that might be a good, sensible spend of taxpayer funds. All the regulations and the rules were to be made once the legislation went through. We didn't want to delay legislation that will get money in the pockets of small businesses and workers, employers who were looking at putting them off. We didn't want to delay that a moment. When you come up with a piece of legislation with no compliance rules and you say it's OK, we're going to look after it, well, we've certainly learned our lesson and we will not be trusting this government. No one should trust this government with sensible spending of taxpayer dollars. There have been so many rorts. And it does look. I still am staggered. As someone who ran a business for 25 years, that grew up in my dad's shop, so I've been around business all my life. My dad was an accountant originally. Fancy someone not taking a moment in the rush to get this money out the door, which was getting the money out the door was a good thing to do. But why wouldn't you just hesitate for a moment and say, "Hang on, what if they turn out not to need it? What happens then?" Like, that is a moment's thought. Just a moment, and we wouldn't be talking about $13 billion. $13 billion, that is the same we spend on the pharmaceutical benefits scheme. $13 billion that could right now be supporting the businesses in my community who not only missed out last time, but are missing out this time. I think what is also staggering about a government that talks a lot about how it likes small business, it does very little to demonstrate that it cares one iota about small business. And what they've done in this latest lockdown sums it up for me, because they've said what happens to small business is not our responsibility, it's the state's. It's hands off from us. Small businesses are on their own. And that's what they've done, and that's why small businesses in New South Wales have been stuck with a mishmash of assistance where there are multiple gaps for them to fall through. And it builds on the failures of the JobKeeper scheme last year, because sometimes it's the same people who are missing out. So they look at $13 billion and they see how obscene it is that companies that did not need this money are not required to give it back. Not only that, they're not even properly asked to give it back by the government. Not even a statement of, hey mate, do the right thing, you know. Not even that. And the fact that Gerry Harvey has today recognised and been shamed into returning money, it shouldn't come to that. This should be something that the government says, we made a mistake. We didn't put the rules in place for good governance that should have been there. I think this was one not where it was an intentional rort. There are plenty of those on the other side, intentionally ripping off people. I think this was just, well, I can't say it, it's not parliamentary to say the way I'd like to say it, but it was an error or a stuff-up. And that's what we're facing the consequences of: incompetence.